Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging deep into the lush, tragic, and politically charged world woven by Arundhati Roy in her monumental novel, The God of Small Things.
They are.
This book is just a vast landscape of memory and consequence, and we have a really rich stack of sources, the novel's most defining excerpts, to guide us.
It's true. And our mission today is, well, it's highly specific. We're not here for a simple plot summary. Not at all.
No, this is a dissection.
Exactly. We are dissecting how Roy constructs this narrative, pulling out the threads that connect the most intimate trauma of a single family in Ammu, Kerala to the massive forces that govern their lives.
Things like political history, the unforgiving laws of caste, and social structure.
Right. Think of it as opening a meticulously constructed clockwork where every single gear is a memory and every spring is a consequence.
Okay, let's unpack this and start with the sensory. Because to understand the tragedy, you really have to feel Eminem first. The source material just immediately immerses us in this atmosphere that is heavy, thick, and just pregnant with fate.
The atmosphere is, in many ways, the first character we meet. It really is. Roy begins by describing May as a hot, brooding month.
It's oppressive.
So oppressive. The heat, the languid days, the days are long and humid, the river shrinks down to a trickle, and you get these vivid, almost cruel details about the environment.
The blue bottles.
The dissolute blue bottles humming vacuously, yes. And they inevitably get stunned by the light, and they die, fatly baffled in the sun on the window ledges.
It sets up this feeling of waiting, doesn't it? A kind of static period of quiet tension right before everything just breaks.
It does. And that tension is shattered, quite literally, by the arrival of the southwest monsoon. It's a massive, disruptive force of nature that becomes almost a symbol for revolution or, chaos in the book.
That's a total disruption.
Absolute disruption. When the monsoon breaks in early June, it brings 3 solid months of wind and water. The whole landscape is fundamentally redefined.
And the colors change.
Oh, the countryside turns this immodest green, and all the man-made divisions, all the boundaries, they're literally blurred as tapioca fences take aggressive root, and these wild creepers just spill across the flooded roads.
So it's a world being aggressively renewed.
Yes, but also becoming overgrown, untamed, and beautifully dangerous.
And when Rahel returns to the Eminem house, years after the core tragedy, the old house itself seems to reflect that same feeling, that damp, brooding, inescapable history.
It carries the weight of everything that happened there. The steep, gabled roof makes it look like it has a low hat pulled over its ears.
Like it's trying to hide something.
Or just retreat, yeah. The brick walls are streaked and bulged with this soft, constant dampness and moss. And then there's the garden wild, overgrown, full of the whisper and scurry of small lives.
And we aren't talking about picturesque wildlife here.
Not at all. We're talking about rat snakes and these hopeful yellow bullfrogs cruising a scummy pond and a drenched mongoose flashing across the driveway.
It's a place that vibrates with this chaotic, small, unseen life.
A life that feels slightly menacing, I think, precisely because it's so untamed.
And Rahel's return, it immediately plunges us right into the core tragedy. The memory of Sophie Mol's funeral. The description is, it's strange. It's almost theatrical and deeply unsettling because of its intimacy.
It's unforgettable, and that is Roy's mastery turning trauma into visceral detail. Sophie Mol lying in the coffin, dressed in her yellow crinoline bell-bottoms.
And her beloved made-in-England go-go bag.
Yes, a trophy of her British life. The church is filled with sad singing, but it's the details, like you said, that really stick. There's the old funeral junkie dabbing cologne on Sophie Mol's forehead.
So that she smells of cologne and coffin wood.
That phrase, it mixes the artificial scent of piety and remembrance with the raw scent of finality. It's just perfect.
Cologne and coffin wood. It perfectly encapsulates the novel's mingling of the mundane and the profound. But I think the truly unnerving part, the bit that sets up the whole psychic landscape of the twins, is Rahel's perspective on the funeral itself.
Exactly. Rahel experiences the funeral not just as a viewer, but almost as an unwilling participant in Sophie Mol's own internal experience.
She sees things she shouldn't be able to see.
Right. She notices the newly painted blue dome of the church. But she knows Sophie Mol's awake for her own funeral, showing Rahel 2 things.
She registers Sophie Mol's secret cartwheel in her coffin.
Which is just this moment of almost rebellious, childish movement. And then she hears, on Sophie Mol's behalf, the dull thudding of the red mud and orange laterite spoiling the shiny coffin polish.
This immediately establishes that the twins Estha and Rahel, who are initially referred to as we or us,
They share not just DNA, but a single fractured consciousness where sensory and emotional boundaries just do not hold.
Right. So the tragedy doesn't just affect the family. It defines the very architecture of the twins' joint identity.
And that's where we need to go next.
That joint identity, that Siamese soul, is where Section 1 begins, exploring Estha and Rahel as really a singular entity. They were born 18 minutes apart in Shillong, Assam, during the 1962 war with China.
And their origin story is steeped in this kind of tragicomic irony, which immediately starts commenting on class and entitlement.
Their parents' car broke down.
It did, and they were nearly born on a crowded state transport bus. This led to a belief, which was particularly held by Estha, that if they had been born on the bus, they would have secured free bus rides for life.
They harbored faint resentment against their parents for having diddled them out of a lifetime of free bus rides. I just love that detail.
Me too.
Because it shows the beginning of this feeling of being cheated out of an entitlement they believed was theirs, even if it was completely nonsensical.
It's Roy using a small, absurd detail to reflect a larger, constant sense of displacement and being denied what they feel they are due. They possess what the source calls a single Siamese soul, and this explains Rahil's highly disturbing and, well, uncanny memory set.
She recalls events she has no right to have.
Right. It's the psychic residue of trauma manifesting as this shared sense perception. She remembers, for instance, exactly what the orange drink, lemon drink man did to Estha in Abalash Talkies.
Despite not being there at all.
And she remembers the taste of the sandwiches Estha ate on the Madras mail. She is holding on to his experience, his fear, his very physical sustenance, as vividly as if it were her own.
Their individual experiences are permeable.
They are. And this mutual possession sets the stage for how they deal with the unspeakable core event. Estha's withdrawal and his silence.
His quietness, which becomes his adult state, it wasn't sudden, was it? It was a gradual winding down and closing shop.
A profound act of psychological retreat. Roy labels this an estivation, which is a type of dormancy, to survive the emotional dry season.
And that dry season, in Estha's case, was triggered by Sophie Mol's death and everything that happened after.
He literally tries to hibernate until the psychological climate changes.
By calling it estivation, that's a kind of animal dormancy. Does that suggest he made a conscious choice to shut down emotionally? I mean, does the source material imply he had any actual choice in the matter? Or was this total psychological withdrawal the only way the child could cope?
That is the core tragic question, isn't it? I think Roy presents it as the only viable mechanism for survival, not really a choice. The alternative was a complete psychological breakdown.
So he just disappears.
He acquires the ability to blend into backgrounds, the bookshelves, the curtains, the doorways, to appear almost invisible to the untrained eye, occupying very little space in the world. He's surviving by eliminating himself from active participation in reality.
And the metaphor used to describe the psychological process of his silence is one of the most memorable in the entire novel. The octopus.
The uneasy octopus that lived inside him and squirted its inky tranquilizer on his past. It's actively destructive and protective at the same time.
How so?
The octopus is stripping his thoughts of words, dislodging old sentences, making them paired and naked, unspeakable, numb. So the silence isn't just a lack of communication. It's a densely layered psychological defense mechanism against the words that would articulate the horror he was forced to endure and conceal.
Years later, this manifests in his adult routine, which is almost monastic in its simplicity.
He walks for long hours, just observing the city but never really engaging with it. He looks wiser than he really was, like a fisherman in a city with sea secrets in him.
The secrets are the trauma. The sea is his memory.
And he carries them silently through the urban landscape, becoming almost a ghost of his former self.
Meanwhile, Rahil's adult life is completely defined by the absence Estha left behind. She lives with this enforced optimism, a brittle mask that her partner, Larry McCaslin, finds exasperating and really difficult to interpret.
Larry doesn't understand the look in her eyes. He places it somewhere frustratingly between indifference and despair.
Yeah.
He just can't comprehend the scale of her reality.
Which she understands all too well.
She does. She recognizes that in the country she came from, personal despair, the emptiness, is dwarfed by the sheer overwhelming pressure of the vast, violent, circling, driving, ridiculous, insane, unfeasible public turmoil of a nation.
And this is where the big God versus small God thesis starts to intersect with her personal emotional state.
Exactly. Her individual suffering is the small God laughing numbly at its own audacity when it's confronted by the big God of national calamity, of caste, of institutional corruption.
So her brittle elation It comes from a terrible place.
It stems from the terrible realization of the relative smallness of her own misfortune compared to the world's madness.
Which brings us back to that crucial realization about their twinship, years after the fact. Rahel realizes that her emptiness and Estha's quietness are, in fact, two sides of the same coin.
They fit together. The emptiness in one twin was only a version of the quietness in the other, that the two things fitted together, like stacked spoons.
Like familiar lovers' bodies.
It's such a powerful image. They're necessary halves of a whole trauma, locked in this mutual silence. The silence of one defines the void of the other.
The sources mention Rahel's appearance, slim-hipped, diamond in her nostril, faded t-shirt, and Estha, the silent man. They're both old enough now to recognize the finality of their situation.
They are at a viable, dieable age. It's a chillingly beautiful phrase.
What does that mean exactly?
It means they are young enough to die, yes, but more importantly, they are old enough to have faced life's ultimate irreversible costs. They have borne the weight of betrayal, of loss, of the destruction of innocence, and they've survived into a hollow adulthood where the only real connection left is the shared trauma they tried so hard to bury.
The trauma that silenced the children is really just the reflection of their mother's trajectory. A woman whose life was a series of desperate maneuvers against unyielding social control. Our sources zoom in on Ammu's struggle, which is one long, desperate flight toward tragedy.
Ammu's tragedy is completely rooted in economic and patriarchal control. Her father, Papachi, denied her a college education.
On what grounds?
He said it was an unnecessary expense for a girl. That decision alone seals her fate. Without a degree, and critically, without a dowry, because Papachi refused to provide one, she was essentially trapped in the Immonem house.
Just waiting.
Waiting for marriage proposals that never materialized, feeling suffocated by her ill-tempered father.
So that desperate need to escape led her to marry disastrously, seeking any exit, only to exchange one prison for another.
Her husband was a full-blown alcoholic with a deep-seated pathology, lying, even about small, irrelevant things. And Ammu found the casual, unnecessary nature of these lies maddening.
Like what?
He would claim to love smoked salmon when she knew he hated it, or invent movies he'd supposedly seen. These small lies reflected a deeper sickness, and the marriage just descended into violence, culminating in the truly shocking moment that forced her to leave.
The moment he tried to prostitute her to his boss, Mr. Hollick, for his own job security.
It was a horrific proposition of sexual transaction, where he proposed sending Ammu to his English manager to be looked after. This wasn't just physical violence, it was the ultimate act of dehumanization.
Viewing his wife as completely disposable property.
Exactly. To be exchanged for professional status. When Ammu fled that marriage, escaping with the trends, her return to the Immonem house was not a homecoming or a refuge, it was a hostile re-entry.
And her brother, Chaco, an Oxford-educated man, immediately ensured she had no legal standing whatsoever.
Chaco immediately laid down the feudal law, asserting that Ammu, as a daughter, had absolutely no claim to the family property paradise pickles and preserves. He told her she had no locus standi.
That's such a powerful phrase, but for the non-legal listener, we should probably pause on what Roy is doing there.
Right. Locus standi is Roy's tragic and ironic corruption of the Latin legal term locus standi, which means the right or capacity to bring an action in court, or to claim a legitimate stake in something.
So by twisting it
into locus standi, Roy emphasizes that Ammu has no legal ground, no standing, no inheritance. It's a complete denial of her familial existence within the property.
And this denial is cemented by Chaco's mantra, which is so nakedly cruel, especially coming from a self-professed Marxist.
It is the ultimate expression of patriarchal entitlement masquerading as law. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is also mine. He denied her any permanent foothold, making her perpetually dependent, unwelcome, and without agency within her own childhood home. She was socially and economically cornered.
This external pressure creates a volatile internal state in Ammu, described as her unsafe edge.
Roy describes her inner life as an unmixable mix. The infinite tenderness of motherhood and the reckless rage of a suicide bomber.
Wow.
Ammu is a woman who, having been robbed of everything, education, marriage, security, has very little left to lose. She has been deemed worthless by society, which ironically makes her inherently dangerous and capable of crossing forbidden lines.
And this volatile internal state is what eventually leads her to the forbidden love. Velutha, the man her children loved by day.
And the transgression is amplified by her using the boat her children used by day.
It's the intersection of the sacred and the profane. She uses a symbol of their innocence, the boat, to cross the river and meet Velutha, linking her sexual and emotional escape directly to her role as a mother.
It's an act of profound, desperate defiance against the crushing structures of the Ammu house and the caste system. She is challenging the big god with the sheer scale of her small, personal desire.
Ammu's end, after the catastrophe, is just heartbreakingly lonely and confirms the grim reality she fought so hard against.
After her banishment and losing her receptionist job due to illness, her final decline is swift and physically painful. She's swollen with cortisone, fighting for every breath. But the most horrifying detail is the psychological manifestation of her trauma.
Her terrifying recurrent dream.
Yes, of policemen with snicking scissors wanting to hack off her hair.
That image is terrifying because it explicitly links her to the most profound social disgrace.
They're trying to brand her as a vesha, a prostitute, confirming the deep societal judgment the family had leveled against her for daring to love Velutha. That dream becomes tragically prophetic of the disrespect she faces even in death.
She dies alone in a strange lodge, found by the sweeper, confirming her ultimate status as an outsider.
And the church refuses to bury her on several counts, a final societal condemnation. She's cremated at a deserted electric crematorium, and Rahel, in a moment of detached observation, thinks she looks like a Roman senator. The whole sequence is a grim validation of her fears. She was condemned, erased, and cremated like the police custody dead, with nobody to mourn her properly. Her life was defined by what was denied to her, and her death confirms her total dispossession.
And Ammu's personal tragedy is magnified by the profoundly dysfunctional family surrounding her, the pillars of cruelty, obsession, and failed ambition. Let's tackle Baby Kochama, Ammu's aunt, who is the ultimate portrait of a life lived backwards.
Baby Kochama is fascinating because she represents the hypocrisy of failed piety. As a young woman, she was utterly devoted to an Irish Jesuit monk, Father Mulligan.
She was in love with him.
Completely. Her love was so consuming that she renounced the material world, joining the convent solely to be near him, only to be frustrated by the senior sisters who monopolized the priest's attention.
And she lived her life at the convent through this bizarre, obsessive communication.
She sent letters signed Kohinoor, convinced she was the most precious jewel of her grandfather's will, a sign of immense misplaced self-importance. She failed spectacularly at renunciation.
So when she returns home...
When she returns home, she doesn't find spiritual fulfillment. She embraces the material world in the most modern, vacuous way possible.
That is where the famous dish antenna comes in. She becomes obsessed with satellite TV.
Yes. She presides over the world through television, consuming global commerce and Western pop culture. American NBA, Grand Slam tennis, and her absolute favorite soap operas, The Bold and the Beautiful and Santa Barbara.
She idolizes the brittle blondes with lipstick and hairstyles rigid with spray, seducing androids.
It's a deeply ironic twist. A failed nun is utterly consumed by global secular materialism and melodrama.
And there's that perfect, heartbreaking detail that symbolizes her shift in focus.
While she is religiously following the global drama on TV, her intricate ornamental garden, the one she used to obsessively groom with tweezers, dies. It's literally smothered by a persistent, invasive weed that the sources appropriately call communist pacha.
Her real, immediate world just decays.
He does, while she obsesses over the synthetic reality on the screen.
And her shift is also reflected in her physical appearance, her transformation into this conical, hoarding figure.
She becomes conical slim on top, wide hips concealed. Her lipstick is often shifted slightly off her real mouth, reflecting the fundamental distortion of her character. She wears all of Ammu's dead grandmother's jewelry, hoarding material objects as a substitute for the spiritual life she failed to achieve.
Rahel's observation is spot on.
It is. She's living her life backwards, achieving a perverse vitality through her mean-spirited, consumerist old age.
Okay, next, let's consider the family patriarch, Papachi, the former imperial entomologist, whose legacy is purely one of unacknowledged discovery and domestic violence.
Papachi's cruelty is entirely rooted in intellectual insecurity. His singular claim to fame was discovering a new species of moth. But due to bureaucratic oversight, it was never officially named after him.
This disappointment became his toxic legacy.
Exactly. Hence, Papachi's moth.
Right.
That moth, described as gray, furry, and with unusually dense dorsal tufts, became a metaphor for his unresolved intellectual failure and insecurity. It was blamed for his black moods and sudden bouts of temper, tormenting his children and grandchildren. It's the inheritance of toxic masculinity fueled by professional failure.
And that failure manifested as this possessive rage directed specifically at Mamachi.
Because she had talents, he didn't, and he just couldn't stand it. She was an exceptionally gifted violinist, her teacher believed she was concert class, and she excelled at making the preserves that became the basis for the family's business.
His response was systemic destruction.
He beat her every night with a brass flower vase. And the moment that truly symbolizes his possessive rage, he broke her violin bow and threw it into the river, destroying her ability to create music.
And Mamachi carried the physical evidence of this abuse her entire life.
The crescent-shaped ridges on her scalp, her brass-faced scars, were the permanent marks of the marriage. It's a detail that reminds us domestic violence leaves literal, physical maps on the victim. And Ammu noted that Mamachi cried at his funeral not out of love,
but because she was used to him.
Yeah. Human beings, Roy suggests, become creatures of habit, even of abuse.
But the dynamic shifted entirely when Chaco intervened, preventing a beating.
That moment was the pivot for Mamachi. Chaco, her son, became the repository of all her womanly feelings, her man, her only love. This transference of affection is total, blinding her to his significant flaws and transforming him into a replacement patriarch.
A sort of benevolent tyrant protected by his mother's adoration.
Right, and Chaco is riddled with hypocrisy and incompetence. It's incredible that the Oxford-educated Rhodes Scholar is running Paradise Pickles and Preserves.
It's the tragedy of failed intellectualism.
It is. He is constantly attempting to assemble these elaborate balsa air modeling kits, which, without fail, crash within a minute, becoming an impartial measure of his abilities. He is brilliant, but completely incapable of practical application or emotional consistency.
And his political views perfectly reflect this hypocrisy.
He advocates for Marxism and believes he can preempt the revolution by organizing his own private labor union at the factory. Yet he is fundamentally feudal in practice, ruthlessly denying his sister Ammu any rights with that locust stand-eye comment.
He's a bourgeois dreamer playing at revolution.
And using grand ideology to mask his failure to connect theory with his own patriarchal practice. He asserts total ownership, his factory, his property, his power. That hypocrisy makes him just as damaging to the family as Papachi ever was.
Which brings us to Section 4 and the core issue of social hierarchy, the brutal reality of caste, and the creation of the unyielding love laws, all epitomized by Velutha.
Velutha is a character defined by the paradox of his worth versus his place in society. His name, Velutha, literally means white in Malayalam.
Because he was so black.
Right. He belonged to the Paravan caste, traditionally toddy tappers, who were subjected to the most severe forms of untouchability. This is where the big god of social structure is most visible and most cruel.
And the history of oppression for the Paravan caste, as detailed in the source material, it's truly barbaric.
The rules they faced historically were aimed at literal, structural dehumanization. Paravans were forbidden from walking on public roads. They were expected to crawl backwards, meticulously sweeping away their footprints so as not to pollute the path of a touchable. They couldn't cover their upper bodies, and they had to cover their mouths with their hands when speaking to divert their polluted breath from a touchable person. This isn't just prejudice. It's a systemic denial of movement, identity, and even the air they breathe.
There was an attempt by some in the community to escape this by converting to Christianity, the race Christians. What did they gain from that, and what did they lose?
They converted to Anglican Christianity seeking refuge, but they often ended up jumping from the frying pan into the fire. They still maintained separate churches. And critically, after Indian independence, they were denied government benefits like job reservations because they were officially categorized as casteless Christians.
So they were outside the caste system for protection and aid.
But still very much inside the system when it came to social contempt. It was a cynical failure of conversion.
Yet Velutha himself possessed exceptional innate genius and skill, defying the limitations placed upon his caste.
That is the central tragedy of Velutha. His brilliance was contained only by his birth. Mamachi was the first to recognize his remarkable facility with his hands. He was trained by a German carpenter from Bavaria, which gave him a highly disciplined, distinctly German design sensibility.
He wasn't just a handyman.
Not at all. He built a Bauhaus dining table. He was the mechanic who maintained the factory machines. He even fixed baby Kochama's garden cherub's bladder.
And Mamachi, in her impenetrable, touchable logic, delivers the ultimate backhanded compliment.
She concedes that if only he hadn't been a paravan, he might have become an engineer. His skills were undeniable, but her rigid adherence to caste dictated that no matter how brilliant, he could never be fully recognized or utilized beyond his designated station. His caste was the one thing preventing his full intellectual elevation.
This whole context is set against the tumultuous political background of Kerala, where communism offered a rhetoric of equality.
Kerala was perpetually politically explosive, fluctuating between Congress and communist power. The sources highlight the Travancore-Cochin Marxist labor union march that converged on the Plymouth, demanding lunch breaks and wage increases.
And crucially, demanding that untouchables no longer be addressed by their caste names.
Right. And Velutha was right there, marching with a red flag with angry veins in his neck. He was an active political actor, fighting for the dismantling of the very structure that oppressed him.
But the politics, like everything else, were corrupted by self-interest, embodied by Comrade K.N.M. Pillai.
Pillai, the professional omeletier, is cynicism personified. He mastered the art of political self-preservation, shifting his ideology to suit the moment. He maintained a lucrative contract to print the Paradise Pickles labels for the capitalist Chaco, even while preaching class war.
So when tragedy strikes,
He dismisses it not with genuine sorrow, but as the inevitable consequence of necessary politics. This ideological hollowness is key. When the true test comes, politics fails the people it claims to serve.
And now, the catastrophic intersection. Ammu and Velutha's affair. The breaking of the love laws.
This affair isn't just a scandal. It is the novel's core transgression against the big god. Roy explicitly defines the love laws as laying down who should be loved, and how much.
Ammu and Velutha crossed a boundary that was foundational to the entire social, economic, and caste structure of Kerala.
Their love challenges the big god's right to define human worth.
Their first night, on the day Sophie Mol arrived, is described as being dictated by biology but timed by terror.
Biology designed the dance, the human need for connection, but terror timed it. They understood instantly that the stakes were astronomical. For each tremor of pleasure, they would pay with an equal measure of pain. The stakes of their small, defiant love were life and death.
And Velutha is depicted as an almost mythological figure in that moment, rising from the river.
He is luminous, black against the dark water, swimming upstream against the current. A man shaped by his labor and his strength, refusing to be pulled downstream by convention.
Yeah.
And Ammu recognizes and tastes his particular paravan smell.
The same smell that baby Kochama found so utterly disgusting.
It is the ultimate act of sensory acceptance and defiance, finding love where society dictates revulsion.
But defiance demands an informant, and Velyapapan, Velutha's own father, becomes the tragic instrument of the structure.
Velyapapan, seeing the boat cross night after night, was caught in an impossible structural conflict between loyalty and love. Loyalty to the system that defined his life, and love for his son. The societal terror took hold of him.
So what does he do?
He went to Mamachi in desperation, offering her his glass eye back, a symbol of his blindness to the transgression, and weeping. In a desperate attempt to destroy the forbidden act he had unintentionally fostered, he offered to kill his son with his own bare hands.
That offer shows the internalized violence of the caste system, that Velyapapan believes his son's death is the only way to restore the social order.
Absolutely. He accepts the premise that his son's worth is secondary to the preservation of the love laws. And baby Kochama, who engineered this downfall, secretly rejoiced, instantly reaching for the most primal, unthinking prejudice as justification.
Haven't you noticed they have a particular smell, these paravans?
Her reaction confirms that prejudice provides the moral ammunition for extreme systemic violence.
Section 5 covers the catastrophe itself and the harrowing price the twins pay for their silence. Let's trace the events leading to Sophie Mol's death.
The twins and Sophie Mol, seeking refuge from the immediate domestic tension following Ammu's first night with Velutha, row across the dark, swollen river in the boat Velutha made.
They're heading to Kari Saipu's history house.
Right, and Sophie Mol, still clutching her made-in-England go-go bag, is swept away when the boat capsizes on the dark, cyclonic river.
And the detail of her body being found with a silver thimble clenched for luck in its little fist is it's devastating.
It is the small, futile charm of a privileged child against the overwhelming force of nature and fate. The innocence is literally extinguished, holding a small, useless measure of luck. But the true horror is how this personal tragedy is instantly swallowed by the political machine.
Comrade Pillai, the cynical Marxist, sees not tragedy but opportunity.
He saw the death as a political card. Pillai was looking to consolidate his power base in the vacuum left by expelled Naxalites. Velutha, the only card-holding party member of Paradise Pickles, suddenly became a snag.
A snag.
A problem. If the party protected Velutha, a paravan accused of murder and sexual misconduct, they would alienate the powerful upper caste electorate.
So he makes a cold calculation, ensuring Velutha has no political protection.
Exactly. He confirms to Inspector Thomas Matthew that Velutha is politically isolated. The party will not stand by him. This political betrayal seals Velutha's fate, demonstrates that the big god of ideology is self-serving. It sacrifices the small, vulnerable man to ensure its own structural survival.
Meanwhile, the twins flee to the history house Karisaipu's Heart of Darkness, only to witness the horror that unfolds there.
They hide in the back veranda and see the police arrive.
Hmm.
The source describes Velutha's brutal beating in horrifying clinical terms. It was not chaotic rage, but sober, steady brutality, the economy of it all.
It wasn't personal revenge.
No, it was a clinical demonstration of human nature's pursuit of ascendancy, structure, order.
That is a devastating line. It tells us the police weren't acting out of passion, but out of institutional necessity, upholding the big god structure and the sanctity of the love laws.
Precisely. They were inoculating a community against an outbreak, ensuring that anyone who crossed the sacred lines of caste and propriety would understand the cost. They were enforcing order. But the final, most sophisticated layer of destruction comes from Baby Kachama, the master manipulator at the police station.
She systematically destroys the children's will to tell the truth.
She uses psychological warfare. She lies, claiming the twins had forced Sophie Mol into the boat and pushed her out, making them accomplices to murder. Then she twists the knife, conjuring terrifying, graphic images of jail life.
The chi-chi piled up like mountains.
Bedbugs and Ammu dying alone in Sikal to force them to be practical.
Her objective is not justice, but the preservation of the family name and reputation and the elimination of the untouchable who dared to pollute their legacy.
Her single goal is to destroy the evidence and save the family's honor. She gives the children only one choice: save Ammu by lying. And Estha, already traumatized and filled with a bottled fear that he recognized from the orange drink, lemon drink man incident.
The free bottle of fizzed lemon-flavored fear from Abhilash Talkies.
He's presented with this final, terrible choice.
The inspector asks a simple question to confirm the false narrative, and Estha says yes.
That single word, the ultimate betrayal born of childhood fear and necessity, results in Velutha's death. Velutha dies in police custody, suffering a massive skull injury, his face swollen like a pumpkin, a mangled genie on the floor.
And Estha is brought to see him.
He is. And the dying Velutha, covered in blood, looks through a film of it and focuses on the child. And Estha imagines that something in Velutha smiled, not his mouth, but some other unhurt part of him, his elbow perhaps, or shoulder.
It's an almost unbearable moment of silent absolution.
It is. Even in the face of his brutal structural death, Velutha offers the child an acknowledgement. But the system has already won. Ammu, who had been locked in her room by Baby Kachama, is finally released, only to be instantly banished by Chaco.
Consumed by his own grief and rage, Chaco screams at his sister, "Get out of my house before I break every bone in your body. My house, my pineapples, my pickle."
He completely dispossesses her, erasing her from the family history and stripping her of any right to mourn or belong. Ammu, trembling, is forced to pack Estha's trunk for his returning to his father, another layer of separation, and soon leaves herself, destined for the lonely, premature death we discussed earlier. The love laws have not only killed Velutha, but they have banished Ammu and permanently silenced the children.
Section 6 focuses on the enduring impact of history, both literal and metaphorical, and how it continues to haunt the family through specific objects and places. Let's return to the history house itself, the site of the beating.
Chaco had analyzed the history house years earlier as Yemenum's own Kurtz, its heart of darkness. He argued that the house was locked to them, symbolizing that they were locked out of their own history.
What did he mean by that?
That they had internalized colonialism and social subjugation, winning and losing a war that made them adore our conquerors and despise ourselves. The house is the permanent dark mark of the past.
And what becomes of this potent symbol of deep, dark history in the modern day? This is one of the most cynical, devastating passages in the book.
It is the ultimate commodification of trauma. The History House is bought by a 5-star hotel chain, the Heart of Darkness, now rebranded for tourists.
History and literature are enlisted by commerce.
Wealthy tourists are ferried in by speedboat. The irony is layered so thick. Old communists who once marched for the rights of the poor now work as fawning bearers in ethnic clothes.
And the high art that symbolizes Kerala's culture is similarly desecrated.
Absolutely. Truncated Kathakali performances, 6-hour classical narratives slashed to 20-minute cameos are staged by the swimming pool because of small attention spans. The deep, complex cultural narrative of the region is literally cut down and packaged for quick consumption by people who don't care about its weight.
And the physical site of the violence, the back veranda where the police converged, is utterly transformed, suppressing the trauma entirely.
It has been enclosed and converted into an airy kitchen. The narration notes that the terror was past, overcome by the smell of food. The trauma of the past, the clinical deadly enforcement of the love laws, is literally suppressed by the cheerful, functional smells of ginger and garlic. History is sanitized and turned into regional flavor for the rich.
Let's review the specific, symbolic objects that carry the story's weight, reinforcing this idea of decay and failure.
Well, there's the river Minakil, once powerful enough to change lives and evoke fear, now described as a swollen drain choked with weed. This environmental destruction wasn't natural. A saltwater barrage was built further downriver.
Exchange for votes from the influential paddy farmer lobby.
Right. So the river's teeth are drawn, its spirit spent. A perfect metaphor for compromised natural and social life under the big god of corrupt politics.
And Papachi's moth, the legacy of bad temper.
Hapachi's moth is the haunting legacy of unresolved patriarchal violence. It represents inherited toxicity, a constant irritating presence that signals the failure of the family patriarch to control anything but his own immediate household through cruelty. It lingers, just like the unresolved family trauma.
And the object that fixes the catastrophe in time.
The plastic wristwatch found buried years later, stuck at 10 to 2. This marks the precise moment of the catastrophe, the hour when the twins' innocence shattered and the love laws exacted their deadly payment. It's a cheap plastic object holding the full weight of irreversible consequence.
Finally, we must return to the twins 23 years later in their final quiet return and ultimate forbidden embrace.
Estha is re-returned, having acquired that ability to blend in, looking like a silent fisherman in a city. Rahel, the dark woman in a yellow t-shirt, finds him.
They are quietness and emptiness.
Yet they fit together like stacked spoons. Their final scene of intimacy is one of small, forbidden love.
Estha, silent, listens to Rahel whisper his full, beautiful litany of names. Estha Papi Chachin Kutupin Peter Mana, way to affirm his lost identity.
And he takes his fingers to her mouth to touch the words to keep the whisper.
So having been ripped apart, silenced, and forced to live separate lives defined by this shared trauma.
They find solace only in each other, crossing the final social taboo by finding comfort in incest. Their bond is the only thing that survives the wreckage of the Akaminum family and the love laws. Their survival, though deeply sad and transgressive, is only possible in this radical, private, and silent communion, the ultimate expression of the small things surviving the large one.
In synthesizing the themes of this profound deep dive, we return to Roy's central thesis. The entire tragedy is the inevitable consequence of the collision between the big god of history and the god of small things. The big god is represented by the unyielding, cynical, and violent sociopolitical systems we've discussed. The love laws, caste restrictions, patriarchal finance, and the corruption of Marxist ideology. These systems demand ascendancy, structure, and order above all else.
And the god of small things encompasses those individual, fragile, essential desires. Ammu's fierce, desperate love for Velutha, Velutha's innate skills and humanity, and the twins' desperate need for connection and innocence.
And these small, private lives are mercilessly crushed.
They are, whenever they attempt to challenge the public machinery of the nation. The clinical brutality of Velutha's death is the big god's correction mechanism.
And Roy's brilliance lies in using specific, visceral details to make this abstract structural tragedy real for you, for the reader. It's not just a philosophical argument, it's the physical reality of a crushed frog stain on the road, Mamachi's rick-rack dressing gown, a silver thimble, or the red polish on an untouchable's nails.
Right. These memorable sensory details carry the weight of the moral and political collapse far more effectively than any academic discussion.
Which leaves us with a provocative thought that the novel offers directly, encapsulating the entire argument. We discuss how Baby Kochama believed Velutha's death and the subsequent trauma were a small price to pay for saving the family reputation and maintaining the social order.
She calculated the cost of life versus the cost of honor. A very cool calculation.
But earlier in the narrative, Ammu, caught in her dream of fleeting happiness with the one-armed man, asked a fundamental, almost childish question that haunts the entire text. If you're happy in a dream, Ammu, does that count?
That is the ultimate question we are left to ponder. When the external world is constantly shifting, cynical, and demanding such a high cost for existence, how do you measure the true value of the small things
Love, integrity, those fleeting moments of happiness, even if only in a dream.
against the overwhelming, brutal demands of the big God that seeks to define what counts and what does not? It's a question of survival and of the human soul.